I never trusted taking a taxi at night, but that evening I had no choice. It was well past midnight, and I had stayed too long at a friend's place in a neighborhood where public transport had long stopped running. I had to get across the city, so I ordered a car through the app. The driver arrived almost immediately. A black Toyota, just like in the app, but something felt off right away. The profile photo showed a young guy with glasses, but behind the wheel sat a man in his 40s with closely cropped hair and an unsettling smirk. "Alex?" he asked, leaning toward the window. I nodded, peering inside. The car's interior was dark and clean, but strangely empty. No personal belongings, no air freshener, not even a bottle of water for passengers. Odd, but I was too tired to think much of it and got into the back seat. "The other driver got sick," he explained, as if reading my mind. "I'm his brother, filling in." Before I could say anything, the car smoothly pulled away. First, everything seemed fine. Soft music, steady driving. But after 10 minutes, I noticed he had taken a different route. "You're not following the route," I said, keeping my voice even. "This way's shorter," he replied calmly. But the streets he turned onto grew darker. Neon signs gave way to dim streetlights. The occasional car disappeared. I opened the app. Our route was clearly heading in the wrong direction. "Stop. I need to get out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes cold and unreadable. Then he smiled, wide and unnatural. "Come on, I'm almost there," he said. I reached for the door handle. It didn't open. Child lock. Then suddenly, he veered off the road into a pitch-black alley. I heard him fiddling with his phone, probably disabling GPS. Now the fear became real. I tried rolling down the window, but before I could act, the car jolted to a stop, and in a flash he turned around. His hand clamped around my throat. "Tell me," he said softly, leaning in closer, "which lasts longer, suffocating or bleeding out?" The world shrank to the icy grip of his fingers. I struggled, but his hold was like iron. He watched me, drinking in my fear, savoring it. I don't know," I croaked. He nodded slowly, like my answer pleased him. Then, abruptly, he let go and turned back to the wheel. "All right, let's make a deal. You leave me your wallet and phone. You walk away." I stayed silent. "Or," he added, "I can take something else." I fumbled for my wallet and phone, handing them over. He smirked, took them, then pressed the button to unlock the door. Out. I tumbled onto the pavement. He laughed, slammed the door, and sped off into the darkness. When I finally caught my breath, I realized I had no idea where I was. The streets were empty, silent. Later, when I reported everything to the police, they told me the car I had ordered never showed up in the system, as if it never existed. I ordered a taxi through the app. Just another late evening, just another ride home. The driver accepted almost immediately, and the car arrived quickly. A silver sedan, just as described. Behind the wheel sat a man in his 50s, with short dark hair and an expression that unsettled me the moment I saw him. Too attentive. "Nathan?" he asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. I nodded, fastening my seatbelt. The car pulled away from the curb. "Long day, huh? You work at Harrison Technologies, right?" he said suddenly. I froze. I did work there, but I definitely hadn't mentioned it in the app. "How do you know that?" The driver chuckled. "Oh, come on. I've driven you before. We talked." I didn't remember him. I used taxis all the time, but no driver's face ever stuck with me. And even if he had driven me before, I never shared personal details with cab drivers. "That's strange," I said, trying not to sound uneasy, spending all day at the office, then heading back to your little apartment on Winslow Street. But you always wanted to live downtown, right? A chill ran through me. He knew my address. Sure, he could see the destination in the app, but what did that have to do with my past aspirations? You always wanted to work in game development, he continued, but instead you ended up programming databases. A little sad, isn't it? Childhood dreams and all that. Panic churned in my stomach. This wasn't normal. And even if you don't remember me, he went on, I know a lot about you. For example, I could even tell you what you had for breakfast. Toast with peanut butter, right? My hands went cold. Could be a coincidence. A common breakfast. But why did it feel like it wasn't? Or maybe I should remind you of something else. Like that night in December, when you were coming back from that party and thought someone was following you. His voice grew quieter, savoring the moment. You swore you heard footsteps behind you, picking up pace, then suddenly stopping, but no one ever stepped out from around the corner. Did they? I stopped breathing. This couldn't be a coincidence. Who are you? I croaked. I'm just a driver, Nathan. Just someone who watches a little closer than most. I frantically searched for options. My phone was in my pocket. I could call the police, I could try to jump out at a red light, but the driver suddenly fell silent. He simply drove, as if lost in thought. Then, after a moment, he sighed as if bored. You know, I had a plan. You're not the first I've watched, he continued, his voice now carrying a dark certainty. People are so predictable. They don't notice when they're being followed. They don't think someone might know more about them than they'd ever want. And now, he continued, his voice trembling with anger, now I get to decide how you disappear. Oh, I had so many ideas. I realized this was it. He wasn't planning to let me go. The car turned onto an empty street. No pedestrians, no other vehicles. Then he stopped. Slowly, he turned toward me, his gaze dark and unwavering. It's just you and me now. No one to interrupt. I didn't hesitate. As soon as he faced forward again and started driving, I braced myself. The car picked up speed. His voice droned on, spewing something unhinged about fate, control, and how everything had led to this moment. Then I lunged. I grabbed the wheel and yanked it hard to the right. The car swerved violently. The driver yelled, trying to wrestle it back, but I threw my weight into the struggle. The sedan veered off the road, slamming into a guardrail with a sickening crunch. For a second, everything was silent except for the hiss of steam from the mangled hood. Pain shot through my ribs. My head throbbed, but I was alive. The door lock clicked open from the impact. I shoved it open and stumbled out onto the pavement, gasping for air. Lights flashed in the distance. Police sirens. Someone must have seen the crash. I staggered toward them, waving frantically. The officers rushed toward me as I shouted, He tried to take me. He knew everything about me. He's been watching me." They pulled the driver from the wreck, pinning him to the ground as he thrashed, shouting something incoherent. When they searched his car, they found a rope, a cloth sack, and a bag of something the officers exchanged grim looks over. Turned out he wasn't just some obsessed stalker. He used to work in security at my company. He got fired years ago, something about inappropriate behavior, threats against employees. But he never let it go, and I was the one he fixated on. The last thing I saw before they took him away was his face. Bloodied, furious, but smiling. A month later, I got a text from an unknown number. "I wonder if you still have toast with peanut butter for breakfast." It was already deep into the night when I finally got into the taxi. The air was thick with the remnants of alcohol, and my head buzzed from the evening's drinks. I wasn't completely wasted, but my thoughts were sluggish, and the world around me felt just a little off-kilter. The driver was an older man with a tired, expressionless face. He barely acknowledged me as I climbed into the back seat. The moment the door shut, he pulled away from the curb in complete silence. Something about his movements felt unnerving, too precise, too mechanical. I shook off the feeling and pulled out my phone to check the route. The map showed we were heading in the right direction, so I leaned my head back and let my eyelids droop. Minutes passed. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the road and the occasional flicker of streetlights were oddly hypnotic. But then, something changed. The cityscape outside the window looked unfamiliar. Narrow, deserted streets replaced the familiar bustling avenues. We were at the outskirts of the town. I frowned, sitting up straighter. "Hey, this isn't the right way." My voice came out groggy, uncertain. The driver didn't react. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the wheel like a machine programmed for one task only. My skin prickled with unease. "Where are we going?" I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. The tension in the car thickened. My chest tightened as I checked my phone again. That's when I noticed something strange. The ride had already been marked as completed. Confused, I tapped the screen, and my stomach lurched as I read the destination displayed in bold letters. Final stop, morgue. A cold wave of dread crashed over me. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice now sharp with fear. "Why does it say the ride is over? Why are we going to a morgue?" The driver finally reacted. His hands tensed on the wheel, and he let out a deep, shaky breath. For the first time since the ride began, he glanced at me in the mirror, and I saw the unease in his own eyes. I thought you knew where you were going," he muttered. "You put in the address yourself." My mind reeled. No, that couldn't be right. I wouldn't have. But then flashes of the night resurfaced. Hazy memories of fumbling with my phone, my fingers clumsily typing in the address while I laughed at something my friend said. A sinking realization hit me. Had I actually entered the old abandoned morgue's address by mistake? The driver exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "Man, I didn't realize where we were going at first, but the further we got, the more it started creeping me out. I thought maybe you had some weird reason to be going there." I stared at him, my pulse still racing. The absurdity of the situation made my breath come out in a shaky, humorless laugh. The driver sighed, shaking his head. "Look, do you want me to take you home?" "Yes," I blurted out immediately. "Please." With that, he turned the car around, and we drove away from that godforsaken place. I quickly dictated the correct address, and the driver entered it into the GPS, setting up a new route. The entire ride back, neither of us spoke. When we finally pulled up in front of my building, I climbed out on shaky legs, mumbling a quiet thanks before shutting the door behind me. I made it home safely that night, but one thing was certain: after this, I was done drinking.